Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Reasons and Resources. So in this episode of Reasons and Resources, we're going to look at reasons and resources for learning the Prolog programming language. So this follows on, I suppose, from a line of videos I've done recently in this series where the languages I'm talking about have historical significance, and a lot of the reasons for learning them is if you're sort of interested in the historical narrative around how programming languages evolved. However, I will say from a personal point of view, although initially I was intending on using this language for, along those historical perspective lines, and I had a Prolog book which I'd added to my programming language library many years ago. What happened was, after learning this language, I found it super useful because of its logic paradigm in languages that I was learning after it. As part of the series I was doing, I'm trying to think what it was called now, Learn to Code, Code to Learn, and I think I was attempting to learn, would it be Scala, maybe? Anyway, there was a number of languages apart from that where I found it useful to understand pattern matching on a sort of real fundamental level as it is done in Prolog. So yeah, that was super helpful, and it was a sort of retrospective reason in that wasn't the reason that I set out to learn Prolog, but if I was advising anybody to learn it and looking for a reason to do it, I'd say, well, retrospectively I found it really useful from a logic paradigm perspective with relation to pattern matching that then may be similar in other languages. And we can bounce off of that and say, well, okay, just generally it's very useful to embrace different programming paradigms, and particularly with the fact that Prolog's like is a declarative programming language. So instead of telling the computer how to solve the problem step by step, you describe what the problem is and the relationships, and then Prolog uses this sort of built-in logical inference engine to find solutions. And as part of my Learn to Code, Code to Learn series, I did walk through, various aspects of Prolog. So I will include a link to that in the description of this video, along with the links to resources up here. So what else might you notice about the language that, could be a reason for learning it? So we've spoken about the fact that, uses logic and reasoning, so that maps quite well to things like, AI, expert systems, NLP, and certainly before we had things like large language models and before Python became popular as a data science programming language and then got heavy use in AI, I suppose both Prolog and Lisp were to some degree sort of go-to languages for AI. And there are still some things in those languages which are still super useful for sort of understanding decision-based systems on a sort of real fundamental level, and certain things that would work nice with a large language model approach as well. So having sort of several different approaches within a solution. as you get used to it, you'll also, I think, appreciate the certain amount of sort of elegance of working in a declarative programming language. It can be sort of remarkably concise, and as soon as you get your head round the fact that you're, like defining you're defining certain rules and relationships and facts, and you get used to seeing those sort of laid out on the page and how they might interact with one another, it's almost like a light bulb goes on in your head. And then from that, you can use ideas for that in your use of other languages, which might have aspects of their syntax or the way they're designed, which you can sort of lean in a Prolog way. And that insight on various levels, the logical side of things, how declarative programming works, the way in which the rules are laid out, the way in which the compiler optimizes things, and the way in which things like quicksort algorithms work, how things like recursion might be reflected in the language, stuff like the way design patterns work and higher order programming. You get these insights into certain fundamentals that it might be possible have been glossed over or abstracted away in other languages. And then that leads on really to another reason, which is, that whole, again, certain and maybe niche approach to problem solving compared to what languages you might already know, may lead you to, it's going to lead you to expand your problem solving toolkit, and also open doors to other specialized fields which maybe you hadn't thought about through the programming languages that you may or may not know already. And you can see the structure looks pretty interesting. And when you work on certain things, there's this, I don't know if waterfall's the right word, but you get this, like, is this true? If that's not true, then is this true? And so on. And it sort of works its way down, both in terms of, reusing rules or leveraging or leaning into rules that you've defined earlier and relationships you've defined earlier, and both also restating some of those rules and relationships to say, okay, well, that didn't fit that particular pattern. What about this one? And sort of working your way through. And I think in the video I did for the Learn to Code, Code to Learn series, I sort of explain how that sort of process works as the logic is attempted to be resolved. So I include links as always to sort of some starter Wikipedia articles and also the articles on logic programming generally. If you look through the results of 2024's Stack Overflow survey, because as of this video, the 2025 survey isn't out yet. Probably be a month or so on from when I recorded this video. If we look down the list, do we even see Prolog? Yeah, it's right down here. Okay, so not necessarily the most popular of languages. It's pretty low down. If we look at admired and desired, we can see 0.7% desired, 23.5% admired. So yeah, not needed, but there is some desire there to. Sorry, there is some admiration there, which I can understand that. And then if we go to the top paying technologies, do we find that it has bubbled up? Maybe because there's not so many. Nope, still pretty low. Obviously, not desired, and not in necessarily in great demand. But don't let that put you off. So I'll include a link to this, just so you're familiar with this book, Programming Prolog. I think this is the one where I have a later or I have a certain edition of this, from what I remember. Yes, yeah, I recognise this book. So yeah, I do have an edition of this this is the one I have in my programming library. I'll include a link to Wikibooks. So if you want some sort of stuff to read around the language, but you don't want to go out and purchase a copy of this, this is really useful. So this is, you may have seen it when I was sort of flicking through here in terms of, there's a couple of implementations mentioned near the front of this article, I think. And SWI Prolog is definitely now my sort of go-to Prolog environment, and that's the one that I use when I was doing the Learn to Code, Code to Learn series. So yeah, easy to download and use. There is also the new project has a new Prolog website, so you can use that Prolog compiler if you want to. I think I may have used this once, way back in the day when I first bought a copy of this, and I was sort of dabbling, but I don't think I've used it that much since. X in Y Minutes also has a section on Prolog. Gives you a pretty good overview of doing some simple things in the language. A couple of videos you might like to watch is one about production Prolog from about 10 years ago, and another one visualizing the execution of Prolog programs, which is pretty useful because as you may have gathered, we're dealing with declarative programming languages here, so a lot of the computer solving the problem, how it does that is done under the bonnet because you're describing what the problem is in the relationship. So it's quite interesting to see how that manifests itself in terms of execution. So I'll include a video for that. There's some episodes on, there's an episode on programming Prolog stuff here in the search.space episodes. Not that many. It's basically a series on logic programming. So there is an episode where they mention Prolog, so I'll include a link to that. Programming Throwdown had an episode very early on in their podcast series about Prolog. It's towards the end of the episode because they always do a sort of first half where they talk about stuff they've been working on that week, and then they sort of cover the topic towards the sort of middle half, I suppose, of the episode. And there's a section on there where they talk about Prolog. Prolog is on exorcism, and it goes through the usual suspects here in terms of working your way through different solutions to problems. And then I did actually, there was an interesting gap here. I think I pointed this out in a previous episode where, yeah, everything was fine and dandy up until, our goal was fine, and then, my wheels started spinning really for Simba and Smalltalk and APL. But yeah, I was back with a bang with Prolog. I had a better understanding of that and was able to critique code a lot better, and yeah, basically put together a section of the website which deals with all sort of classic things like binding and scope, and gives you some stuff you can run using SWI Prolog. What you'll notice between the two languages is what gets returned in terms of when you run load and then execute the query, and the query is processed. You may notice differences in the sort of response that comes back to say, oh, okay, I've finished doing the sort of logical processing between different implementations of the language. So that's something I noticed. And you could probably track down some online resources if you wanted to run an online REPL, but I think it's better to download a logic environment and work in that, so you sort of get used to it. So, thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.